Game Set Matchup, the podcast where we talk everything partnerships, the good, the bad, and the ugly.
Welcome to Game Set Matchup, the podcast where we discuss all things partnerships. I'm your host, Greg Watts, and please welcome our guest today, Danyal Khan, founder and CEO of investment firm Altocrest. Danny, hello and welcome.
Hi, Greg. Thanks so much for having me on.
Well, you're our first guest of the new year, so it'd be amiss of me to say Happy New Year, or are we too late for that?
14th of Jan, we're okay. I think just about 15th, anything before the 15th for me. I think that works quite well. Happy New Year to you too.
Thank you very much. We just got in there, and a month before Valentine's Day, which is kind of terrifying.
Yeah.
Well, look, starting off with an overview and introduction to our guest, perhaps you can tell our listeners a little bit more about who you are, your background, your current role, and a little bit more about Altocrest.
Yeah, sure. So look, I'm Danyal Khan. I'm the founder and director at Altocrest Advisory, a firm I've set up myself. And effectively what we do is we're a debt advisory firm. We help clients raise debt financing. So it's as simple as that. In terms of what I've done in my previous experience, sort of HSBC, Royal Bank of Canada, and EY, and at EY and debt advisory, the clients I worked with previously. So examples are Warburton's from a large corporate perspective, and other examples are Total Swimming, which is run by Steve Perry and Becky Adlington, so former Olympic athletes, etc. in that sense. And the reason I set up Altocrest was really to help those businesses in a sense that the scale of businesses we work with can vary, but those in what we call the middle market, so typically 1 million to 9 million EBITDA businesses, really helping them grow. And actually our ambition is just to become a partner and help them. The mantra we use is, let's see if we can use debt as a real tool to help boost your growth. That's the piece that we're looking to help people going towards.
Thank you. That really. Did I tell you that I used to work for King's Mill Bread? Talk about Warburton's.
No, I did not know that actually. Yeah,
there you go. I in my very early career, I was a brand manager for King's Mill Bread, owned by Associated British Foods. So I know Warburton's very well because we were wargaming about how to stop them coming down south. But clearly, that wargaming wasn't very successful.
Well, yeah, I think they still probably aren't as far down south as they'd like. That is interesting. Did you work in their factories as such, or were you?
I was in their head office in Staines, but I visited all of the factories, and I always loved it because whenever we went there in the morning for a morning breakfast meeting, typically you would smell freshly baked bread, and we'd be served fresh bacon butties, which as a vegetarian you wouldn't particularly like, but I loved them.
It smells amazing, doesn't it, in that sense? But yeah, it's they're pretty big though, aren't they? The factories are huge in terms of what they have. It's crazy.
They're huge. Did you get to visit them?
I have, yes, I have, and I actually based up north in Bolton, and the factory is next to my gym, so I smell that on bread pretty much most days in that sense.
Oh, it's the best place to have a meeting, I swear. Well, look, bread aside, coming back to investment and debt advisory, I'm really keen to ask because I know that our listeners will also be keen to hear. How did you make the leap from corporate leader at EY and previously HSBC and others to the founder of a startup, an entrepreneur? And how would you say the approaches differ when it comes to creating partnerships?
It's an interesting point, actually. So I really enjoyed my time working in corporate, especially at EY, and you learn a hell of a lot. It's a really fascinating place to be in. You're just surrounded by super talented people, which is great. I felt there was a different way of doing things going forward, certainly for the businesses that maybe at the smaller end that need some help and more dedicated advice was the thought process. I took a little bit of a leap of faith, to be honest with you, in terms of, look, I really enjoyed my time at EY, but I thought it came across a perfect opportunity for me in terms of my youngest son was starting school in September, so reception, and there was a piece that I thought I can take the summer off and then really launch the business. But it felt like we are going into a different generation, different age where big firms will always exist. I think they're always going to be huge value add, but there is a more nimble and agile way of doing things in terms of working directly with companies, not as being part of a huge workforce, but being more nimble in terms of working with them directly, having a more dedicated advice in terms of what you provide to them. And actually, in some ways, dare I say it, no offense to my previous colleagues, a better advice. It's more direct, there's less, I have less total clients, but I'm giving them a more dedicated premium service is the idea anyway, in terms of how that builds out.
Well, that really resonates with me. I mean, like you, I had a corporate career before I started doing what I'm doing now with Findr, and I think there's a number that it's night and day. And I think in many ways, in a corporate, there's a lot more structure, security, safety, access to resources. But when you're by yourself or starting up, then there are no processes. You have to create everything from yourself. You have to hustle. You have to get business. It's hard, right? I think one of the things I like to try and do is dispel the myths that running a startup is all about ping pong and espressos in Shoreditch. If only, or maybe I'm doing something wrong. But what's your take on that? Kind of the perception of running or starting and running a startup versus working for a corporate.
Look, it's been one of the hardest things I've done in terms of work. I've never worked harder, but I've never enjoyed it as much either. It's just there's partly, I think, you're right, that's correct. You're working for yourself, so that's a huge part of it. But you don't have a guaranteed pace.
Oh no.
Again, so that's different. So as much as if people think, oh, you can work your own hours, yes, but you do know you've got to make sure you're getting the money in and getting the income in. There's a piece around, for me, I am what I call service led. So the product I'm selling to my clients is service. I really respect entrepreneurs like yourself and others who it is a product piece, and getting that out there and making sure it's a fit for the market. But hustle, the word you use there, that's the main one. It's just non-stop, meeting people, but building relationships, building partnerships, which, don't get me wrong, of course you do in the corporate world, but I think everyone talks about this entrepreneurial revolution as, AI and whatever, make things become more efficient. But I think there's that piece around continuously, navigating and hustling. It is a interesting place to be in, for sure.
Talking about your gym. I went to the gym earlier today, and without going into too much detail, I met a potential investor in my gym who has been learning about what we've been doing for quite some time, and just said, "Oh, are you raising at the moment?" And so I think I don't want to talk about hustling 24/7, because that sounds like I'm constantly trying to sell, which is not the case at all. But I think when you run your own business, I think it's always being maybe a little bit more open or receptive to an opportunity which perhaps might not have been so obvious when we were working in corporates. And I kind of like that.
It's on your mind though, right? Sorry to interrupt.
Yeah.
It's always on your mind in that sense.
Yep.
You don't quite switch off, which you do in high pressure jobs as well in corporate, but you've got to be open to everything. And it's such a core part of your identity, for sure.
Well, I like this, and you kind of picked me up on this for one of the things that I often talk about, which is have the conversation with everybody. Just say yes to everybody, because you never know where a conversation may go, and it might not go anywhere straight away, but it might go somewhere in a month's time, 6 months' time, 2 years, 3 years, 10 years. But just have the conversation. I think a lot of startup founders, I'm not sure if you agree with this, and entrepreneurs sometimes can be a little bit too rigid with the conversations that they might accept. Whereas I don't know, I think opportunities can come from places where you may not have necessarily thought they might. I'm not suggesting not having a clear, target audience and purpose and all of that. Absolutely. But getting to that kind of target person, you might get them there in an unorthodox way.
I completely agree. And look, what's the worst that happens on a conversation? Obviously, you need to target and tailor them, but the worst case is you've lost half an hour, 45 minutes, whatever it is. But you don't know where a conversation may go. I've noticed that more in this, realm of life, in terms of I've had some conversations, I've gone into some conversations. I'm embarrassed to say this. I had preconceptions thinking this isn't going to be a great meeting. I don't know what I'm going into because I'm walking into it. And then I walked out thinking, you absolute idiot. This was amazing. This person is so helpful. Don't go in, with these preconceived views. Have an open mind. And to your point, I completely love that. You don't know where a conversation may lead to.
Oh.
There is no real downside.
No, I mean, don't get me wrong. We all come across people who perhaps after that first 30-minute call, we perhaps don't want to continue the conversation. But maybe one or two. Thankfully, they're in the minority, a significant minority. But equally, you wouldn't have known if you hadn't have tried. And the vast majority are, are good people. And actually, I find that most people, the vast majority, do want to help, and they want to be kind, and they want to support. And that's, I think, one of the privileges of doing what we're doing and being on the path that we're on, is that actually people do want to see us succeed, which is wonderful.
Absolutely. And obviously we're probably both biased on this to say this, but when you're running your own business, there is that space that, yeah, you do feel that in that sense. I had this really random one the other day. I was sat in a lawyer's office. There was a lady, she was selling cakes there, and I just heard her say to someone on reception, I've had no sales through all day, etc., or something like that. I've not had any sales in the hour. Wasn't even hungry. I just had to get up and buy a £3.50 brownie from her.
Oh,
It was
Danny.
like, you know, anyone who's self-employed, like certainly since I've gone into it myself, just got massive respect for it. It's not easy, you know, it's not easy doing it. So it's respect to anyone doing that.
That's really lovely that you did that, and that would have made her day. And yeah, and I would also say as well that this is often people say, "Oh, what's it like doing what you're doing?" I say it's the hardest thing I've ever done in a million years, but equally, I'm the most engaged that I've ever been. So I think I'm not sure you could ask for more than that. But no, we could certainly talk about this
Yeah.
at length. Going back to looking at partnerships, if I may, because they are, after all, the lifeblood of businesses. What is your definition of a business partnership, and how would you go about creating them? I asked you this before, but just want to kind of go back and just check again.
My definition of a partnership, I certainly in my work, I don't think it needs to be something that is too rigid in terms of partnership, like contracted, etc. I think it's around building connections with people, companies, and they're people that you can say, oh, we could work closely together in terms of I could either, you know, refer you work or vice versa, or just refer you on to introductions, etc. And that's the piece around we talked about, conversation not going anywhere. And it's an interesting question you ask. I think that's probably the main one I'd say. It's being able to refer that person on to somewhere else or vice versa. Just building a partner is someone I'd say that, oh, this person's going to help you build my network and I'm going to do the same vice versa. I'd call it as broad and as simple as that. Look, of course, I'll have my core clients where there's a real partnership where like I'm going to constantly hope to add value for you. But at a more simple level, I think it's just willing, you know, a few group of people willing to build a relationship and going from there.
I agree with you. I mean, I often think of that a sale is a one-time transaction from one to another, whereas I think of a partnership is kind of very much two-way, like any relationship in life, where it's reciprocated, and sometimes there might be something commercial in there, absolutely. In fact, oftentimes there is, but it's more of a long-term kind of two-way or multi-way kind of relationship where, you know, it's built on trust and support and enjoyment and kind of, but a mutual, you know, both parties or all parties get something out of it, rather than a sale, which I think perhaps is, you know, one way. Nothing wrong with that, but
Very
I think
transactional rather than partnership.
yeah. Yeah, nothing wrong with that, but yeah, so that's my kind of I think definition.
And of course you need it for any business, but there's more to business than just that.
I think so. I think of sales as some, again, this might be a little unfair, but sometimes a little not boring, but I find partnerships much more interesting because they're much more long term. You get to know the people, you get to know what they like, what they don't like, what they're, you know, what makes them tick, what doesn't make them tick, and then you can maybe build stuff together, which I think is enjoyable.
100%. If you can, and if you do that over time and build something great, you know, it would feel quite rewarding at the end of the day. Sure.
Yeah, rewarding, satisfying. Yes, it's well. Look, for all the I can't talk. For all the budding partnerships people listening, what advice would you give to your younger self starting out? Perhaps the do's and don'ts of partnership creation and development, maybe with hustling in mind.
Yeah, it's a good question. I would say in the past, I've probably not looked at building partnerships, even in a corporate style environment. And there's various reasons for that, but I think it's just having that open mind and what I alluded to before in terms of you need to go out and build your network. It's such a cheesy thing to say, but network is so powerful, and through network build partnerships. And equally this, while you do need to tailor and do your research to make sure that people you're building partnerships with, there is some relationship to what you can actually do in terms of there's relevance. But as I said before, don't go in with any premisconceptions. You never know where a conversation may go. And I think both of those pieces that my younger self would be, A, not meeting enough people, and B, just having that preconception before even having that meeting, say, this is not going to lead anywhere. Why am I even bothering? So, you know, it's probably narrow-minded in the past, which I'm glad I've changed, to be honest with you.
Well, I agree with you, but I wouldn't be too hard on yourself, because even now, we find that we run various events and we run all sorts of things, and sometimes I can say to my co-founder, "Ugh, I can kind of be if I'm having a bit of a bad morning, if I haven't had coffee, I can kind of be a bit whingy or whatever." And she says, "Look, we both know that once you've done it, you're going to be you'll really enjoy it." So
Yeah.
it's just, and that's always the case. But I do agree with you entirely, which is just, yeah, you are, network. Go to the breakfast, go to the lunch, go to the, don't go to necessarily absolutely everything, but go to as much as you possibly can, because as we both have said and recognized, you just don't know who you're going to meet. You don't know who you're going to bump into. And, we bumped into investors, customers, clients, wonderful partners, and we, a friend, we have a mutual friend who I bumped into, who I made friends with in the gym, who you previously worked with, who introduced us. And so you just never know where it's going to go. And actually,
well, that's case in point, right? What are the odds of that? Otherwise, yeah, you spoke to our friend. Otherwise, you never know. We wouldn't be here right now.
Well, actually, Angelo must get a name check, and
Yeah,
actually,
let's give Angelo a name check for sure.
And from both of you, we've been introduced to quite a few significant organisations. So your former employer and various others, and you just never know. So have the conversation and be open. So coming on to our last two questions, if I may. So having created partnerships for a big chunk of your career, what are your top tips when it comes to creating high-performing teams and winning cultures?
So that's an interesting one. So obviously right now it is just me working on my own, but I actually see that as an opportunity, because obviously I'd like to grow the team in the future. But when I work with my clients, they're trying to say, look, I'm an extension of your team. That's the message that we work through. And high performing teams, it's all around the simple stuff around just being open and being very transparent. This is what we're trying to achieve here, working together. This is where I stand, and actually being honest with your client in terms of, this is what I think I could achieve. This is what I think we should do. If you're not happy, please shout, and let's have that open communication, that if anyone's not happy, or I say not happy, just not on the same page, let's be willing to have that conversation. I think that's the best thing about strong performing teams. People can actually feel like they can be themselves and say, look, they're comfortable enough, look, I'm not happy here. Or even vice versa, this is great because we are so open with our communication. It's all around trust and culture, which are, they're buzzwords that go around there, and that takes time. But I think it's around the real high performing deals I've worked with clients, and I call that, in terms of the best results, are when you've had a really open and honest relationship, which takes time, but it needs to start on day one in terms of building that trust and relationship.
I couldn't agree more. I think all relationships, business, personal, all of, everything in between, have to be built on trust and being able to be comfortable that you can say something which maybe is unpopular or a little uncomfortable or whatever it might be, but you're not going to be judged by that, or or the other parties, how they're going to respond, but you feel comfortable that you can share that, and equally they can share that. Why do you think as a society sometimes that we're a little bit British society, I might point out, talk about cultures, that we sometimes are a little bit hesitant about saying what we really think or what we really want?
We are very polite, aren't we? Let's be fair. We're probably stereotyped and know all of that. And actually, a good friend of mine has said this to me. Sometimes, as Brits, we're not direct enough. And he's sort of British but Asian Korean origin in that sense. And I do take that on board. I just think sometimes maybe you need to be direct to get the best results.
I agree.
Yeah, there's no point not being direct during the meeting that you're having and thinking that later on down the line when you're going to bed or whatever. It's pointless. I would rather, if I'm working with a client and a client says to me, Danny, I really don't like this, let's just not go down this route. That's great, because at least we're on the same page, and I'd just be glad that they feel like that way to say that. That sense.
And then you would respond accordingly. Actually, I think this is right because of these reasons and these reasons. And then you would come to, the outcome together.
Yeah, absolutely. It's good to challenge views, right? That's when you want. And that's probably answering your first question. What's that high performing team? It's really challenging and battling those views together to get the best result. In that sense.
I'm not suggesting everything's a conflict, but I would go as far as saying conflict gets a bad rep. And actually, I think the conflict, you could also use the word disagreement or alternative view if we're British, but those types of things actually get a bad rep because but actually I think they're beautiful, because actually when I would say that another kind of description of a conflict is actually someone with a different point of view. And what better than in a high-performing team and culture than to have someone with a different point of view that you might not have otherwise considered, which can make the ultimate outcome better.
Absolutely. And I don't know if you know Daniel Priestley, he says this. Obviously, he's done lots of podcasts, etc. But his one is, in his teams, he gets people to say, look, I hear your view, I'm going to lock horns on that. So in terms of the animal world, let's lock horns, disagree.
Yeah.
It's a very simple methodology, but it gives people that safe space to say, let's lock horns.
Yeah.
We'll argue, we'll debate. Argue's a strong word, debate it. Then we're done, and we know where we're going to go out.
I really like that. But the whole notion of locking horns, actually, yes, it's aggressive, but you can also think of it as you're getting closer together. You're kind of, you're getting together, which you have to come close in order to, grow. So I think that's really a lovely metaphor, actually.
Absolutely.
I'm going to take that one. Take that one, if I may.
Yeah, I might need to use that one. I've actually not used it before. You brought that out.
Yeah, there we go. There we go. Locking horns. Well, look, to round us off, if I may, one last question.
Sure.
What do you see the future holding for businesses when it comes to creating partnerships with each other? And what, if anything, will you and Altocrest be doing differently?
Well, it's what I'd like to see in terms of why I exist. And I try and help clients raise debt financing. And I look at businesses that can be a business with a lender as two businesses going forward. And that's what I'm looking to arrange here. And my mantra is, look, debt has this negative connotation, rightly so. I have to explain to people I work in debt, help people raise debt. It's like, what? But that's debt is bad. It's like, no, it can be bad, but not always bad. Look, sorry,
don't give away equity.
Yeah, exactly. Don't give away equity. That's the thing. And for me, it's what I'd like to see people working together is you want to achieve your goals quicker. And that's what do you use in terms of external tools, debt financing being one of those, to bring that into your business, not to give away equity, as you say, but to achieve your goals quicker. The same way that if I didn't get a mortgage, I wouldn't have been able to buy my house yet. That would take me a number of years, but I can get there quicker. The same way as a car loan or any other aspect, but just a simple level. The stupid thing to do would be to borrow too much. If I borrowed too much, then I would have to pay I'd have to sell my house to pay the lender back, and that's not what I want to do. It's doing things sensibly. But look, we have this huge potential to work together in terms of businesses and then the lending environment to really grow on that basis. So I'd say keeping all options open and actually navigating that to see how my business can grow the best way possible is what I'd like to see going forward.
No, that's I couldn't agree more. And what is wonderful is you are starting to, I don't want to say demystify debt funding, but you are kind of you're leading the charge on talking about the benefits of it. I mean, we've actually recently learned about debt funding in the past 18 months. And I think as cash generating businesses with strong EBITDAs as you are focused on, they are tremendous tools to grow without giving away equity.
The best do it, right? The best businesses, the biggest businesses, that's how they do it. So it shouldn't be any of the smaller side. Absolutely.
Well, Danny, I can't thank you enough for joining us on Game Set Matchup and sharing your incredible, brilliant advice and tips. And I'm going to take away locking horns as well, if I may. Thank you so much for joining us, and look forward to speaking to you in the not too distant future to see how things are going for you.
Thanks so much, Greg, and thanks very much for having me. It's been really good. So thank you again.
Thank you.
Thanks for joining this week's Game Set Matchup. Tune in to hear more about the need to knows and the do's and don'ts when it comes to creating successful business partnerships.